Before you watch another second, comment the city you're watching from. I need to know how far this story travels. My son opened the door, looked straight at me and said, "Mom, these dinners are for family only now. You're not invited." I was standing there with a dish still warm in my hands. Food I'd woken up at 6 in the morning to make. Food he'd loved since he was a child. And in that moment, I understood something terrible. What he didn't know was that over the last 5 years, I had given him $218,400, and that night, on his own doorstep, they made the most expensive mistake of their lives. The November air cut through my coat as I stood frozen, staring at a house I'd helped them buy. Through the frosted glass, I could see candlelight, hear laughter, the clink of wine glasses. Sunday dinner had already started. Our Sunday dinner. For 2 years, I had driven 40 minutes every single week to keep that tradition alive. I cooked, I baked, I listened. I swallowed comments. I ignored the way conversations stopped when I entered the room. Because he was my son. Because after his father died suddenly, it had just been the two of us. I rang the doorbell. The laughter paused. Footsteps approached. Then the door opened. He was wearing a shirt I didn't recognize. Expensive. Everything his wife bought him was expensive. "What are you doing here?" he asked. The question hit harder than the cold. "It's Sunday," I said carefully. "Dinner. You said 6. I lifted the dish slightly, like proof I belonged. He didn't step aside. Behind him, I could see the dining table set with the good china. The set I bought them for their first anniversary, candles, full plates. His wife's parents, people I'd never met. "Can I come in?" I asked. That's when his wife appeared. She placed her hand on his shoulder. Not gently, possessively. "Oh," she said, smiling without warmth. "You came." "I brought dinner," I said. She glanced at the dish like it annoyed her. "We're keeping things intimate now," she replied. "Just immediate family." "Immediate." "I'm his mother," I said. My hands were shaking now. "I am family." Her smile tightened. "We've been meaning to talk to you about boundaries." Boundaries. 2 years earlier, when they moved into this house. The house I helped pay for. It was my idea to start Sunday dinners. He'd said it made him feel close to his childhood again. Or maybe he'd just like the free food. "Ethan," I said quietly. "Tell her." He wouldn't look at me. "Mom," he whispered. "Celeste's parents are here. We're just trying to keep things limited. I waited for him to stop this, to defend me, to say one sentence. He didn't. "I raised you," I said. "I worked double shifts. I paid for your education. I walked you down the aisle." His wife sighed, clearly done. "It would be better if you left." I looked at my son one last time. He said nothing. "I'm sorry, Mom," he finally said. "Please go." I don't remember walking to my car. I only remember sitting in my apartment hours later, still wearing my coat, staring at that dish on my counter like it was proof of how replaceable I'd become. And just before dawn, when the sky turned gray, I opened my laptop because love had made me blind. But numbers don't care about love. And when I finally added everything up, I realized I hadn't been helping my son. I had been paying to be erased. If you've ever helped family financially, type yes in the comments. Because what I discovered next still makes my hands shake. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table watching the sky lighten, the casserole untouched on the counter, my coat still on my shoulders. Like if I took it off, I'd have to admit what had just happened. At 5:58 a.m., I opened my laptop. Not to cry, not to vent, to count. I told myself I was just checking one thing, 1 month, 1 payment. That was the lie I needed to get started. Mortgage help. Temporary, they'd said. Car payment, just until his bonus. Kitchen remodel. We'll pay you back once it's done. I pulled up my bank statements and scrolled, and scrolled, and scrolled. If you're watching this right now, pause for a second. Have you ever avoided adding the numbers because you were afraid of the answer? I created a spreadsheet. Dates, amounts, notes. At first, it felt harmless. Then it didn't. $450 a month for the mortgage. For 5 years, I froze and did the math again because it couldn't be right. It was. $87,000. Just to keep them in a house I wasn't welcome in. My hand started to tremble. I kept going. The car Celeste insisted they needed. $34,000. The short-term loan for his startup. $22,000. The kitchen remodel, she said, would increase resale value. Hey, 500. Emergency transfers. Credit card bailouts. Trips that were once in a lifetime. By the time the sun was fully up, I had to push my chair back because I felt sick. The total stared back at me in bold numbers. 280 and a 400. I read it 3 times. Then a 4th. That wasn't generosity. That was my retirement. That was the inheritance my mother left me. That was every overtime shift. I worked when my husband died, and I had a teenage son to raise alone. And suddenly the doorway made sense. They didn't push me out because I was intrusive. They pushed me out because I was no longer convenient. My phone buzzed. Ethan. I let it ring. If you're wondering why I didn't answer, ask yourself this. When was the last time he called me just to ask how I was? Another call. Then a voicemail. Mom, Celeste says you're upset. I don't understand why. Can you call me back? Upset. That word almost made me laugh. An hour later, a text came. From his phone. But I knew who was typing. You didn't need to embarrass us by leaving like that. Embarrass them. I stared at the message, then opened my banking app. Every payment to Ethan's account was still scheduled. Automatic. Predictable. Reliable. Like me. Mortgage. Pending. Car. Pending. Monthly support. Pending. My finger hovered over the screen. For 32 years, I'd been the woman who fixed things. This time I chose not to. Cancel. 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 With each tap, something heavy loosened in my chest. But stopping wasn't enough. If they were going to pretend this money was a gift, then I needed proof of what it really was. I pulled out an old folder labeled Important. My late husband used to say, memories fade. Paper doesn't. Inside were bank statements, emails, notes I'd scribbled after phone calls. And then I found it. A voicemail from 3 years earlier. Ethan's voice. Casual, confident. Thanks for the loan, Mom. I'll pay you back next month. I replayed it twice. Loan, not gift. That's when I realized something that changed everything. They hadn't forgotten what they owed me. They were counting on me never asking. And the moment I did, they were going to regret it. Before you judge me for what I did next, answer this honestly. Would you protect yourself, even if it meant standing against your own child? Type yes or no in the comments, because the moment I made one phone call, everything started to unravel. At 9:03 a.m., I called a law office Susan had given me the night before. Downtown, glass building, the kind of place I never imagined needing. Her name was Patricia Chen. She didn't rush me. She didn't soften anything either. She listened while I told her about the dinner, the doorway, the money, the number. When I finished, there was a pause. Then she asked one question. Did you ever sign anything stating this money was a gift? No. Did your son ever promise to repay you? Yes, I said. More than once. Another pause. Papers shuffling. Ava, she said. Then you don't have a family dispute. You have a financial one. My stomach tightened. I don't want to hurt my son. Her reply was calm, unemotional. You're not hurting him. You're stopping him. That afternoon, I sat across from her in an office, overlooking the city I'd worked in for 3 decades. The city where I'd raised my son, paid taxes, cared for strangers while my own family slowly learned to use me. Patricia reviewed my spreadsheet in silence. 2AI400, she said finally. And this is only what's documented clearly. She looked at me. This pattern shows dependency, guilt pressure, and isolation. It's called undue influence. Isolation. Suddenly, Sundays made sense. The slow way I'd been edged out. The eye rolls. The unanswered calls. The night I became not family. What happens now? I asked. Patricia slid a yellow legal pad toward me. We send a formal demand. Letter. Certified. Itemized. Legal. It puts them on notice that this isn't emotional anymore. And if they ignore it, they won't, she said. People who live on borrowed money panic when the rules change. I signed the retainer with shaking hands, wrote a check that hurt. but not as much as the humiliation at the door. 2 days later, the letter went out. Certified mail. Signature required. That same afternoon, my phone exploded. 7 missed calls from Ethan before noon. Voicemails stacked one after another. Mom, what is this? Why is there a lawyer involved? Celeste is freaking out. Please call me back. I didn't. Then came the voicemail from Celeste. Her voice was controlled, but tight, like she was holding something back. Ava, this is completely inappropriate. Families don't involve lawyers. You're embarrassing us. Call me immediately so we can handle this privately. Privately? After they publicly erased me. I forwarded the voicemail to Patricia. Her reply came fast. Good. Save everything. That evening, Ethan showed up at my building. I saw his car from the window, the one I helped him buy. He stood outside for a long time before buzzing my intercom. Mom? He said quietly. Please, just let me explain. For a moment, I almost went downstairs. 32 years of habit doesn't disappear easily. Instead, I pressed the button. Put everything in writing, I said. Through my attorney. Silence. Mom, are you really doing this? Yes, I said, I am. I released the button. From the window, I watched him stand there, lost, embarrassed, suddenly small, before walking back to his car alone. I didn't feel powerful. I felt clear. Because once you stop fixing problems for people, you find out whether they loved you, or just what you provided. And next, they were about to make an offer so insulting it would end any chance of peace. They tried to buy my silence. Before I tell you how much, comment, insulting, if you already know how this ends. Because when their offer came, I finally understood how little they thought of me. The call came from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Morrison, a man said smoothly. This is Daniel Hartman. I represent your son and his wife. So, they'd sent a lawyer to do what they couldn't. I'm listening, I said. There was a pause, just long enough to sound rehearsed. My clients would like to resolve this matter quickly and amicably, without unnecessary stress. Of course they would, I replied. He cleared his throat. They're prepared to make a good faith gesture. That phrase alone told me everything. How much? I asked. Another pause. $20,000, he said. Paid over 2 years. In exchange, you withdraw all legal claims and formally acknowledge the funds were gifts. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. Say that again, I said. 20,000, he repeated a little firmer this time. Given the family relationship, I laughed. Not softly, not politely. I laughed because it was either that or scream. You're offering me less than 10 cents on the dollar, I said, and asking me to lie in writing. Mrs. Morrison, his tone sharpened. You need to consider the consequences of taking this to court. It will be public. It could permanently damage your relationship with your son. I leaned back in my chair. My relationship with my son was damaged when he let his wife tell me I wasn't family. I said calmly. The money just proved it. Silence. Then he tried fear. Litigation is stressful. You could lose. Is that risk worth it at your age? I thought about the casserole cooling in my hands. The doorway. The look on Ethan's face when he didn't defend me. I already paid the price, I said. You're just late. I hung up. 10 minutes later, Patricia called me. They contacted you directly? She asked. Yes. Her voice sharpened. That tells me they're panicking and making mistakes. What do we do? We reject it, formally, and prepare for escalation. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks, not because I felt victorious, but because I wasn't backing down. The next morning, the emails started. From Ethan. Long, emotional, careful. Mom, please. You're blowing this out of proportion. Celeste is under a lot of stress. We never meant to hurt you. We can go back to how things were. How things were. Me paying. Them taking. And pretending love covered disrespect. Then the guilt arrived. Do you know what this will do to Celeste's career? People will talk. You'll lose me forever. That one hurt. I didn't respond. I forwarded everything to Patricia. Her reply was immediate. This is pressure. Manipulation. Save it all. 2 days later, a certified envelope arrived. Inside was a check. $5,000. With a typed note on expensive stationery. Cashing this check constitutes full settlement of any perceived obligation. My hands shook, not from fear, from anger. They really thought I was desperate. That's small. I called Patricia. "Do not cash it," she said instantly. "Send it back. This is a trap." So I did. And that's when the tone changed completely. Because the moment they realized I couldn't be bought cheaply, they stopped pretending to be reasonable and started showing me who they really were. When begging failed, they tried to scare me. If family has ever tried to silence you, comment, "I see you." Because this is where everything turned ugly. It started with a voicemail from Celeste. Not calm, not polite, not pretending anymore. "Ava," she said, her voice tight with rage. "You are taking this way too far. You gave that money because you wanted to feel important. You're lonely, and now you're punishing us for setting boundaries." I didn't interrupt. I let her talk. "You showed up uninvited. You inserted yourself into our marriage," she continued. "And now you're harassing us with lawyers. If you don't stop this, we'll make sure people know what kind of person you really are." I saved the voicemail. Then I forwarded it to Patricia. Her reply came 5 minutes later. "Do not respond. This is excellent evidence." Excellent! That word would have shocked me a week earlier. Now it just made sense. That afternoon, Ethan came to my building again. Not quietly, not respectfully. Mrs. Alvarez from 4B knocked on my door, clearly uncomfortable. "Your son is downstairs," she whispered. "He looks upset." I stepped to the window. There he was, pacing the lobby, phone pressed to his ear, running his hand through his hair like he used to when he was in trouble as a teenager. For one dangerous moment, my body moved before my brain did. 32 years of motherhood doesn't shut off easily. Then I remembered the doorway, the casserole, the words family only. I called Patricia. "Good," she said after I explained. "Let him be seen. Let him spiral." Ethan buzzed the intercom. "Mom, please," he said, voice cracking. "Celeste's parents are furious. This is getting out of hand." I pressed the button. "You should have thought about that before telling me I wasn't family," I said evenly. "All communication goes through my attorney." "Mom, please." I released the button. From the window, I watched him sit on the lobby bench, head in his hands. He stayed there for 10 minutes, maybe more. I didn't feel powerful. I felt something better, detached. That evening, Patricia called with an update. "They're requesting court-mandated mediation," she said. "Neutral judge. They want to avoid trial." My stomach tightened. "Do I have to see them?" "Yes," she said honestly. "But I'll be there, and so will the facts." The mediation was scheduled for Friday morning. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay in bed replaying every version of my son I'd ever known. The little boy who crawled into my bed after nightmares. The teenager who cried in my arms when his father died. The man who stood silent while his wife erased me. By morning, something inside me hardened. At mediation, I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't explain. I wouldn't apologize. I would tell the truth and let it stand. Friday arrived gray and cold. Patricia met me outside the building, composed and unshakable. "Remember," she said quietly as we walked in, "you're not here to fix a relationship. You're here to resolve a debt." The room was small, windowless, sterile. Ethan and Celeste were already seated with their attorney. Ethan looked thinner, guilty, exhausted. Celeste looked flawless and furious. She didn't look at me. The judge, a woman with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, nodded. "Let's begin," she said. As the documents were reviewed, the room grew uncomfortably quiet. Then Celeste snapped. "You want to talk about money?" she said sharply. "Let's talk about control. She didn't give because she loved us. She gave so she could own us." Ethan whispered her name. She ignored him. The judge raised a hand. "Ms. Morrison, enough." I leaned forward. "No," I said calmly. "Let her finish." Everyone looked at me. "If helping my child after his father died is control," I said steadily, "then I'll accept that label. But control doesn't come with repayment promises, and generosity doesn't end with humiliation on a doorstep." The judge closed the folder. "This mediation is over," she said. "You are not negotiating in good faith. This matter is going to trial." Celeste went pale. Ethan looked like he might be sick. As we stood to leave, Patricia leaned toward me and whispered something that made my pulse spike. "There's more," she said. "Someone came forward." I turned to her. "What do you mean?" She met my eyes. "A witness. With information they never expected you to hear. Someone came forward with information they were never supposed to share. Before I tell you who, comment truth. If you believe secrets never stay buried. Because what I heard next didn't just change the case. It changed how I saw my son forever." Patricia didn't tell me the details right away. She waited until we were back in her office. Door closed. Blinds drawn. Like whatever she was about to say deserved privacy. "2 days ago," she began, "a woman contacted my office after seeing the mediation filing. Court records are public." My stomach tightened. "Who is she?" "Her name is Emily Ross," Patricia said. "She works in accounting at your son's company." I felt the air leave my lungs. "She was hesitant," Patricia continued. "She's young, early 20s, afraid of retaliation. But she said she couldn't stay silent anymore." "About what?" I asked, already knowing the answer would hurt. Patricia slid a folder across the desk. "Your son has been taking money from the company." I stared at her. "Not large amounts at once," she said carefully. 500 here, 1,000 there. Enough to avoid triggering alerts, but consistent." My hand started to shake. "For how long?" I asked. "Almost a year." I closed my eyes. This wasn't desperation. This was a pattern. "What proof does she have?" I asked. Patricia opened the folder. "Spreadsheets. Highlighted discrepancies. Dates. Transfers. Notes." "He told her supervisor," Patricia said. "They chose to handle it internally. Nothing changed." I swallowed hard. "Why tell me?" Patricia's voice softened. "Because Emily's grandmother raised her. She said when she heard how you were treated, she couldn't stay quiet. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I thought about the man I raised, the promises, the excuses, the way he'd always assumed consequences would never reach him. "This stays confidential for now," Patricia said. "But if this goes to trial, and it establishes financial dishonesty beyond you." That night, I didn't cry. I sat in silence. Because suddenly, everything fit. The entitlement, the lies, the ease with which he took, first from me, then from others. 2 days later, my phone rang again. "Ethan," I answered this time. "Mom," he said quickly, like he was afraid I'd hang up. "Please don't do this. The trial. This is destroying everything. You should have thought about that before." I said quietly. There was a pause. Then his voice cracked. "I never meant for it to go this far." "Neither did I," I replied. "But here we are." He took a shaky breath. "I love her, Mom. I don't know how to choose." The words hit me harder than anger ever could. "You already did," I said. "When you stayed silent at the door." Another pause. Then softly, "I'll see you in court." I hung up before he could say anything else. That week, something strange happened. People started reaching out. Old friends of Ethan's. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Stories trickled in. Small at first. How he stopped returning calls. How Celeste spoke for him. How money always seemed to be an issue, no matter how much they made. By Friday, Patricia had a new folder labeled Pattern. She looked at me and said, "They think this is about a dinner." I shook my head. "This is about accountability." The trial date was set for 3 weeks later. And for the first time since that night on the porch, I wasn't afraid, because the truth was no longer mine to carry alone. And when it finally came out in court, they wouldn't be able to outrun it. The courtroom went silent when the evidence was played out loud. Before I tell you what my son admitted under oath. Comment justice if you believe parents deserve respect, because this was the moment everything broke. The trial began on a Wednesday morning. Cold. Gray, the kind of weather that makes a courthouse feel heavier than it already is. Patricia walked beside me through the metal detectors, calm and prepared. I clutched my folder, not because I needed it, but because it reminded me I hadn't imagined any of this. Inside the courtroom, I saw them. Ethan sat at the defense table, shoulders slumped, suit hanging loose on his frame like he'd lost weight, dark circles under his eyes. He looked smaller than I remembered. Celeste sat beside him. Perfect posture, flawless hair, chin lifted like she was attending a board meeting instead of a trial. About money she never intended to return. She didn't look at me. The judge entered. A woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Let's proceed," she said. Patricia stood first. Her voice was steady, precise. "Your Honor, this case is not about a family disagreement. It is about turn waiting 400, transferred over 5 years under repeated promises of repayment, promises that were never kept." She began laying out the evidence. Bank transfers appeared on the screen one by one. Dates, amounts, notes. Each payment landed like a drumbeat. Then came the messages. Text messages read aloud. "Mom, can you help just this once? I'll pay you back next month. Thanks for the loan." Temporary help. Loan, not gift. I watched the jury's faces change. Then Patricia played the voicemail. Ethan's voice filled the courtroom. Younger, confident, careless. "Thanks for the loan, Mom. I'll get it back to you next month." The room went quiet. Celeste's jaw tightened. The judge leaned forward. The defense tried to argue context, family dynamics, love. The judge cut them off. "Counselor," she said sharply, "do you have documentation stating these funds were gifts?" Silence. They didn't. Then Patricia did something I hadn't expected. She called Emily Ross to the stand. The young woman looked nervous but determined. She explained her role in accounting, the discrepancies she'd noticed, the pattern of small amounts disappearing over time. Ethan stared straight ahead. Celeste's hands clenched in her lap. "This establishes a pattern of financial dishonesty," Patricia said calmly. "Not isolated, repeated." The judge nodded. Then it was time for Ethan to testify. My son stood, raised his hand, and swore to tell the truth. He wouldn't look at me. "Did you promise to repay your mother?" Patricia asked. "Yes," he said quietly. "Did you repay her?" "No." "Why not?" He swallowed. I thought she'd always be there." The words hit harder than any insult. "Did you take money from your employer without authorization?" Patricia asked. His lawyer objected. The judge overruled. "Yes," Ethan whispered. "Small amounts." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge's expression hardened. When it was over, Ethan sat down slowly, like his legs could barely hold him. Celeste finally looked at me then, not with anger, with fear, because the story she'd told herself that this was just an emotional mother overreacting had collapsed in public. As court recessed for the day, Patricia leaned toward me. "They're done," she whispered. "They just don't know it yet." I didn't feel triumph. I felt grief, because no matter how much money I recovered, this was still my son. And tomorrow, the verdict would decide more than finances. It would decide whether accountability mattered at all. The jury didn't take long. Before I tell you what they decided, comment "ready" if you've stayed with me from the beginning, because what happened next changed every single relationship in that room. We waited in silence. The courtroom felt smaller somehow, like the walls were leaning in. Ethan sat with his hands folded so tightly his knuckles were white. Celeste whispered to her lawyer, her confidence finally cracking around the edges. I didn't look at either of them. I stared straight ahead and thought about the woman I used to be, the one who apologized for existing, who paid to keep peace, who thought love meant never saying no. That woman wouldn't survive this moment. The bailiff stood. "All rise." The jury filed back in. 6 people. Ordinary faces. People who didn't know me, didn't know my son, didn't know anyone loyalty. Only the truth. The foreperson, a woman about my age, stood. "In the matter of Morrison versus Morrison," she said clearly, "we find in favor of the plaintiff." My breath caught. She wasn't finished. "We award $218,400 in repayment, plus interest totaling $252,960. Celeste gasped. Ethan closed his eyes, but the judge held up her hand. "There's more." She looked directly at my son and his wife. Given the documented pattern of manipulation, emotional distress, and abuse of trust, this court awards an additional $50,000 in damages, as well as full legal fees. The final number echoed in my head. Over $300,000. But what stayed with me wasn't the money. It was the look on Ethan's face. Not anger, not even shock. Recognition. The judge continued, her voice firm. I am ordering immediate wage. Garnishment. 25% of both defendants. Income until this judgment is satisfied. A lien will also be placed on any property owned by the defendants. Celeste shot to her feet. This is excessive, she snapped. The judge's eyes hardened. What's excessive? She said coldly. Is stealing from your mother and trying to justify it in my courtroom. Silence fell like a weight. Outside, reporters waited. Cameras. Questions. Headlines already forming. Patricia handed me a prepared statement. This case was never about revenge, I read aloud. It was about dignity. Elderly parents are not ATM machines. Love does not mean exploitation. Flashes popped, but inside I felt empty. I'd won, and somehow I'd lost something too, because as they led Ethan past me, he stopped. He looked at me, not as a defendant, not as a child, as a broken man. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. That night I went home to my quiet apartment. No casseroles, no Sunday dinners, no pretending. Just truth and the knowledge that consequences had finally arrived. But the story wasn't over yet, because winning in court doesn't heal a broken family. And the final cost of all this would come after the verdict. Winning didn't feel like victory. If you've ever been right and still felt broken, comment, I understand. Because the hardest part of this story didn't happen in court. It happened after everyone went home. The money started moving almost immediately. Court orders have a way of making promises real. 25% of Ethan's paycheck. 25% of Celeste's. Deposits appeared in my account with cold, mechanical precision. Numbers without emotion. Justice without warmth. I stared at the first transfer for a long time. This was money I needed. Money I deserved. And yet my chest felt hollow. The headlines moved faster than I expected. Mother wins 6-figure judgment against son. Court rules in favor of elder financial abuse claim. Friends I hadn't heard from in years reached out. Old co-workers. Distant relatives. You're so strong. I could never do that. You did the right thing. Maybe I had. But strength doesn't cancel grief. 3 days after the verdict, a letter arrived. Handwritten. Ethan's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Mom, you were right. About everything. I was weak. I let Celeste speak for me because it was easier than standing up. I let her isolate me from you. I let myself believe you'd always be there to fix things. Now I know that was selfish. Celeste is filing for divorce. She can't handle the judgment. The lien, the attention. She's moving back in with her parents. I've lost the house. The job is uncertain. I'm starting therapy. I don't know who I am without someone telling me what to do. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know I'm sorry. I love you. Ethan. I read it twice. Then I cried for the first time since the verdict. Not because I wanted him back the way he was, but because I finally accepted that version of my son was gone. I sat at my table that night with a blank sheet of paper. I didn't owe him a response, but I needed one. So I wrote, Ethan, I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. I made mistakes too. I held on too tightly after your father died. I used money to stay close because I was afraid of losing you. That was my failure. But your choices were yours. Silence at the door. Promises you never kept. Letting someone erase me from your life. I hope therapy helps you grow into a man who can stand on his own. But I can't be part of that journey right now. This isn't punishment. It's self-preservation. I love you. I always will. Mom. I sealed the envelope. Then I put it in a drawer. Maybe I'd send it someday. Maybe not. What I knew for sure was this. I was done sacrificing myself to be loved. And slowly, quietly, I started building a life that didn't revolve around being needed. Friends, a support group, painting classes I'd always postponed, peace I hadn't felt in years. There was a hole where my son used to be, and I learned how to live with it, because some endings don't come with closure. They come with boundaries. And in the final part, I'll tell you what this cost me, and what it gave me in return. This is the part no one talks about after winning. If you're still here, comment stayed, because this ending isn't loud, but it's real. People think justice ends the pain. It doesn't. It just changes its shape. The months after the verdict were quiet. Too quiet at first. No Sunday dinners. No last-minute calls. No one asking me to fix what they broke. At first, the silence felt like punishment. Then it felt like peace. The money kept coming in. Small, steady transfers pulled automatically from wages by court order. I stopped checking the amounts obsessively. I stopped attaching emotions to numbers. Money had stopped being love, and love had stopped costing me everything. I started doing things that had nothing to do with anyone else. I joined a support group at church. People like me. Parents who gave too much, loved too hard, paid the price. We didn't compare stories to compete. We shared them to survive. I took a painting class at the community center. My first canvas was terrible, crooked, messy. I kept it anyway, because it was mine. I reconnected with my sister after years of polite distance. We talked honestly for the first time about our childhood, about our mother, about how women like us were taught that love meant endurance. I stopped enduring. Once while cleaning, I found the casserole dish from that night, the one I'd brought to a house I no longer belonged to. I held it for a long time. Then I donated it, not out of bitterness, out of release. I heard updates through other people. Ethan moved into a small apartment, started over at a lower-level job, stayed in therapy. He sent flowers on my birthday. I accepted them. I didn't call. Celeste disappeared from my life completely, and that was fine. Some chapters don't need epilogues. One afternoon, months later, I visited my husband's grave. I chose myself, I told him. It hurt, but I did it. The wind moved through the trees like an answer. As I walked back to my car, I passed a young boy hugging his mother. "I love you," he said. She smiled and kissed his hair. I smiled too, softly, knowingly. Love is beautiful. But love without boundaries is a debt that never stops growing. I didn't get my old life back. I got something better. A life where I am not bought, not used, not erased. A life built on respect. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in the giving, in the silence, in the fear of saying no, hear this. You are allowed to choose yourself, and that choice is never too late. If this story meant something to you, write one sentence in the comments. I read them all. And if you believe dignity matters more than blood, you already know what to do. Thank you for staying.